Hello, everyone, and welcome to TOEFL Masterclass Advanced Strategies for High Scores. And today we are here with the amazing Miguel Marcano, and he is the fearless leader of one of the largest TOEFL IBT study groups on Facebook with over 130,000 members. He is also an amazing expert TOEFL teacher. Miguel, thanks so much for being with us on this webinar. How are you today?
Oh, thank you for that great introduction. I'm doing quite well. Thank you for asking,
Fantastic.
and thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so glad you're with us. I want to start just by asking you, how did you begin teaching international students, and how long have you been teaching the TOEFL?
All right. Teaching international students came to me as an extracurricular activity when I was studying at the University of Virginia. I did it in order to complete my dissertation paper, and it was about international students and how they were coping with the American system of education. And through that, I got into TOEFL. I got introduced basically as my research led me to the exam, and I started seeing a bit more what the students how they were struggling with the exam, the fear they had with the TOEFL exam. So I started digging a bit deeper into the TOEFL test, and I started teaching a bit more students. I recall that my first group of students was a group of Korean students in Virginia, and just even though that was not my major, I was studying psychology. I really liked teaching from that moment on, and I never expected to be a teacher until I started teaching, and that was 2009. So I've been teaching for, God, my math is awful. What, 11 years, 12 years, I think,
Mhm.
going on. So that's how long I've been doing TOEFL ever since that time.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm sure, I don't know if this is true for you, but I've found that a lot of TOEFL, I mean, having a psychology background is really useful because a lot of TOEFL is a mindset, is a psychological kind of preparation for this, for this test day. And there's a lot of psychology involved in that. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, many students struggle, making the switch from their academic life to TOEFL life. Many of the students that I have the pleasure to teach, they were great academic individuals. So they're not used to failing a test. They're not used to not getting the best possible performances. So it really affects, their confidence and you know, their energy altogether to take the TOEFL exam when they start seeing so many, you know, negative cases, people that are now passing the exam right away, or friends of them that have been doing this for years. So it's not rare for me to start a TOEFL lesson and end up having just, like a counseling session with my students. And yeah, it definitely helps. It helps because
Yes.
I try to get in their shoes and try to see what they're seeing in the TOEFL exam. Because as you know, this test means so much for them. It could be a game changer. I mean, it is a game changer. So I often have to just keep them, going, motivated, not to give up. It's easy to give up. It's much more difficult to continue. So yeah, it definitely helps to have that background. Even though I never really practice my career, when I teach, I'm always doing some sort of counseling. If sometimes more, sometimes less, but I'm always doing something.
Absolutely. And you keep such an amazing Facebook group going. I mean, I just want to congratulate you and praise you and applaud you because to hold that kind of space for so many students, and there's so many posts every day. And I know you posted not too long ago about the recent, world events, the pandemic that's going on, and all of these ETS test centers are obviously closed down. And you posted some things to know about the at-home version of the test, what students should know. So if students are planning to take the test at home, what are some major things for them to keep in mind?
Well, the exam itself, the information is fairly the same. Of course, the experience is vastly different. I've had right now, I believe, five students, sorry, who've taken the test at home, and they've all had different experiences. I've had a few of them that they loved it, others who they didn't like it as much. I had one who told me that she was freaking out in the middle of the break because instead of having a 10-minute break, she had like a 40-minute break because the proctor would not come back. Eventually, the person came back and she finished the exam. She received her grade, so there was no penalty. But things that they can expect is, of course, being in a friendly environment can be beneficial. But at the same time, you have to set the mood for a test. So right now, since we're all at home, particularly students who have kids, it's important for them to separate the area and do something and take it either in a room or in a place where they could, be fully focused on what they're doing. I had a student who took her test in a closet, in a walk-in closet, just because she needed to have that kind of concentration. The reading, the listening, the speaking, and the writing section are fairly the same. The experience while taking notes is slightly different because if you choose to use a whiteboard, then it can be a bit uncomfortable depending on the size of the whiteboard that you're using. Also, taking notes using a marker is not the same as using a pencil. Those who are using the transparent sheet of paper, it's a bit more comfortable. That's what I'm recommending students to use. But at the same time, once again, you have to get used to using a marker. It's a bit more likely for you to erase with the palm of your hand as you're writing. So there are little things you have to be aware of. The fact that you're not using headphones can be also an issue because we get used to using headphones all the time when we're doing a TOEFL exam. So since you cannot use this hardware during the test, they have to get used to listening through the speakers, which the learning curve is not that bad. It's not that big of an issue, but as you know, any small changes in the TOEFL exam can throw you off sync. So just be aware of that. All the students that I'm telling them right now is it's the same content, it's the same information. So the strategy is the same. Just make sure that you are in a setting that you control, but be aware of these conditions: the noise level, the speakers, the way you're taking notes. Be prepared for any malfunction. If the connection drops, have their phone number ready. They'll give you that information. So if something happens, you can call them right away and tell them, listen, this happened, I'm still here. Of course, hoping that doesn't happen. And one last thing, make sure to schedule your exam at an hour that is suitable for you. I've had some students taking the exam early in the morning, others towards the middle of the day. And I believe one took the exam like at 9 p.m. per time. So keep in mind the exam is going to be 3.5 hours long. So if you start at the evening time, you're going to go well into the night. So just make sure you can dedicate that chunk of time for the test.
Oh, great. Those are great tips. Thank you. I wanted to ask you this too. I mean, because there's so much traffic in your Facebook group, and sometimes, the posts are not always, factual. Some of the posts are scam. And for a new TOEFL student, and if English is your second language or third or fourth, it is very difficult to, and if you're new to this experience, to tell the difference between what is factual, relevant information for the TOEFL that you need to know, and how to tell the difference between that and kind of these scam posts that are put out there. And I know you do such a great job of taking those down, but it is something that students everywhere, maybe not just members of your group, but everywhere should know the difference. Do you have some tips for students there to kind of tell the difference between real factual TOEFL posts and the scam posts?
Definitely. Actually, the group, just to give you a quick clarification, that group actually was already ongoing by the time I got there. So it's not a group that I created. Mm-hmm. I became a member and then a collaborator and then now one of the admins there. So actually, the admins that are the administrators that are in the group, we always work together trying to enforce our own rules there. And as you mentioned, my day is quite busy, but every now and then, at least 5 minutes every hour, I take a look at it and I try to take down posts that are malicious, posts that are misleading. And sometimes even students have the best intentions at heart, but they're promoting books that are paper-based TOEFL from 2001 that is not going to benefit students right now. Tips on how to spot a fake post. I think the biggest, the most damaging ones are the ones that are offering free certificates, the ones that are offering to change your grades, the ones that they tell you they can offer you leaked questions. These individuals have really no good intention whatsoever. I've had students and members who have been victims of these scams. And trust me, they've lost not hundreds, but thousands of dollars because then they often blackmail you and tell you if you don't give them more money, they're going to report you to ETS. And then you're not going to take the test. And these people, when you fall for them, they collect as much information as they can from you. You know, anything from your name, email, phone number to maybe your passport, your social security number. So they have information to use against you. So if you see anything like that, please don't go for it. Often individuals, once again, some of them with good intentions, some of them with ill intentions, when they try to give you things like join a WhatsApp group or join this or join that, I always tell the members in the group, be careful because we can't control what happens in those groups. And just today, I'll give you a quick example. There was an individual who was offering a free evaluation for the writing section. And this individual has been flagged in the group already for conducting malicious scans where he offers a very brief evaluation for free. And then you become a student, you start paying him for the lessons in advance. And then the person never shows up or constantly says you have bad connection and then he keeps the money. So be careful with anything that looks too good to be true, often is. Whenever you want to go in a particular route, whether it is a tutor, a website, don't be afraid to ask. The TOEFL IBT study group, it's a community. So if you have a question, just leave it there. You can simply say, I'm thinking about using this system. Have you guys had any luck with it? And you'll see the comments. If you see that the vast majority of comments come from reliable sources, I mean a diverse group of people. If you see that it's the same kind of group of people, the same country, the same background, that may be a bit fishy. But if you see that it's coming from a lot of different places, then you may trust that individual. But always use your gut feeling also, be careful there. Right now, because of the quarantine, because of being at home, I'm seeing a surge in tutors and specialists participating in this group. And while we endorse that, we have no problem having individuals there promoting their services. Some of them do not seem to be what they claim to be. So always ask questions. If you're trying to get a service, whether it is a tutor, a group, or a website, feel free to ask them as many questions as you want to. If the person is not hiding anything, they should not have any problem answering your questions. If you feel the answers are a bit dodgy or they don't want to answer, then be careful.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. Yeah, it's so important to be aware of all, because there's just so many scams out there, and just to be aware, ask questions. I think it's really important for students to know that. Miguel, I know you are an athlete yourself. I know you love to play sports, and I think you were an athlete in college. Is that right?
I did.
Uh-huh. And I'm wondering about the correlation, because I come from a dance background, and I was wondering if you ever, correlated the kind of mental preparation that an athlete has to maybe, is it similar to a kind of a TOEFL athlete, a scholar who's preparing to take the TOEFL test? Do you ever, make that connection? I would love to hear your thoughts.
I certainly do. And my background as a football player, most of my students are they're not connected with the American football culture. They know soccer, but not football. And I always treat my students like if I were a football coach, where I push them, quite a lot. I have one quote that I always tell them, which is almost doesn't count. If you almost pass a TOEFL exam, you're still taking it again. So we don't settle for okay. We always go for the extra point. We always do more. And it's funny because in my lessons, they get a lot of football vocabulary, going the extra points, a touchdown, and things like that. And they kind of enjoy it. I do see all my students as athletes because particularly my demographic of students is typically pharmacists, dentists, physicians, teachers, nurses, and this group of students require a high grade. So I'm always telling them, if you want to go, past the norm, you have to be willing to put in the time. And that means training outside of the classroom. That means not settling for giving an okay answer, for double checking, focusing on progress and not practices. And yeah, I definitely use that football mentality, like, we're not losing, it's not acceptable to lose kind of thing in my lessons. But yeah, definitely I do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all need a little bit of that, like, boom, go for it, and that motivation and that discipline, really, that athletes have to endure, and that, you know, I can so see you being that kind of coach that's going to like push me to achieving really beyond what I think I can do.
And I mean, definitely, because I could be both at the same time. Like sometimes I'm the biggest softie, and then I've had students like, you know, pour out their feelings in the classroom, and I will be like, okay, it's okay, let's cry it out, let's get it there. But I can make that quick transition and say, okay, we're done with this, let's get back into the game, let's get back to what we do. My students often make fun of me because you know, in a good way, because they say it's difficult to impress you. For example, if we're doing a speaking section and they do a great job, and let's say their average performance is 26, 27 at that point, you know, I tell them, that's all right, that's great, we can still get more. And they often tell me, yeah, but I need 26. And I reply, that's great that you need that, but I'm going to push you for 30, because if you come short, we still have leverage there. If I only show you how to get 26 and you miss one thing, then we're going into the almost territory and we're not going to get there. So I'm the kind of teacher that I celebrate for a couple of seconds and then I say, do it again. Show me you can do it again. And some students work really well. At the beginning, it can be quite shocking because maybe they're expecting more of a cheerleader kind of teacher, which I could be, but I'm very pushy. I make sure that they get that kind of push to get to where they need to be. And I tell them, at the end of this, you're either going to hate me or love me, but if you pass the exam, I'm sure you like the results. So
Yeah,
that's what I do.
that's fantastic. And so, what are you offering students right now, and where can they find you if they want to work with you?
Great. Now, when it comes to offering my students right now, my lessons are still going strong. So I'm still offering students a full TOEFL prep if they so desire. Many of them decide to train with me from the beginning, reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Others come to me just for a particular area, whether it is speaking or the writing section, which both of those areas are my go-to, let's say my favorite areas to work with my students. Currently, actually, and that's my fault, my website is being redeveloped. I had one that was very basic. I'm creating it again. So the easiest way to find me is through the TOEFL IBT study group. Now, there are several TOEFL IBT study groups, even with that name. So if you want to find me, just type on Facebook, TOEFL IBT study group. Check for the one that has the biggest amount of members. Once again, we have 130 something, nearly 140,000. And I am one of the administrators. You'll see my post right there. Feel free to message me. If you have any questions, just type my name, Miguel Marcano, and feel free to send me a message via Messenger or just tag me on a comment and I should reply as quickly as I can, which sometimes it takes a few days, but I'll get to you.
Okay,
And
wonderful. Oh no, go ahead.
that was no, I was going to tell you regarding my lessons. My schedule at the moment it's quite flexible. Typically, I teach in the morning, up to 6 hours in the morning, and then 6 hours in the evening. So whether you live in the United States, in Europe, or in Asia, typically I may have at least 1 hour to offer you.
Okay, wonderful. And tell us a little bit about the lesson that you have planned for us for this webinar.
Great. So the lesson that I'm going to be teaching is going to be how to approach question number 2 of the speaking section. I'm going to show the students the way that I use to prepare my students in this area, the way that I personally use when I take the TOEFL exam, which I do quite often. I typically take the test 4 or 5 times per year. This year has been the exception because of all the issues that are happening. But I'm actually scheduled to take the test on July the 11th. Hopefully, between now and then, I can take it. And what I do with my students is I will show you guys, or my students, or students in general, sorry, the way that I do the exam, the way that I take notes, the way that I deliver the answer. And most of the time, when students start modifying their performances to match exactly what the TOEFL wants, which is one of my core values. Give the TOEFL what they want to hear. Don't do anything extra. Don't worry about the flashes and the fancy words. Just give them what they want to hear. And if you do that, they're gonna give you the grades you need. So in the lesson that I'm going to be teaching, I'm going to be showing all the students how to approach question number 2 of the speaking section, the little pro tips that I use, and hopefully that can help them raise their performance.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here, Miguel, and sharing your wisdom with us in this webinar, and we look forward to your lesson.
Thank you for having me, Christine. And yeah, I look forward towards creating that lesson and hope to hear from the feedback from all of you guys.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here once again.
My pleasure.
Hello everyone and welcome to another TOEFL Masterclass. My name is Miguel Marcano. I am a TOEFL tutor and also one of the administrators of the TOEFL IBT study group, one of the biggest TOEFL groups available online. You can find us on Facebook, where we currently have more than 140,000 members. In this group, students come together to learn more about the TOEFL exam, to exchange information, and to get support while preparing for the TOEFL test. Today, I'm going to talk about the speaking section of the test, which is one of my favorite areas of the test. Now, for many of you, this is actually one of the most complicated parts of the exam, but today we're going to make it a bit easier. More specifically, this lesson is going to revolve around question number 2 of this section. Now, before we get into any techniques, tips, or strategies for this question, let's actually understand what kind of question you have to face, how the question is broken down, and how you can prepare for this question. So, for those of you who have never seen this question before, those of you who have never taken the exam, question number 2, as it is indicated in the name, is the second question of the speaking section. This question is the beginning of the integrated questions, which include multiple activities such as reading, listening, and then actually speaking. In this case, you have to read a small piece of information in a text. Then you have to listen to a conversation, which will always be between a man and a woman, and then you have to give your answer. Now, you actually have a specific time frame for each of these areas. For instance, you have 50 seconds to read the information. After those 50 seconds, the information will disappear and you will no longer have access to the reading section. So those 50 seconds are important for you to read the information, and if you want to, you can take certain notes regarding the information that is presented there. Then comes a very important part of this question, which is the listening section. The listening section of this part is actually the core, the center of this activity. Your answer will revolve around this section. So you have to pay close attention to the conversation you're going to hear. It is always going to be a conversation. It is always going to be a conversation about what you read in the reading, and it's always going to be between a man and a woman. Now, typically, there are 3 kinds of responses you would hear in this conversation. First, you may hear 2 students where one of them may be in favor of the information presented in the reading section. The second approach could be the students, one of those students, or one of the participants, could actually be against the information presented in the reading. And in very rare occasions, you're going to have what I like to call a mixed approach, where the individuals have a mixed feeling about the information. It means they could agree with one element of the information presented in the reading and disagree with another. Now, this last example is not so common, but it does appear from time to time in the exam. The last time I took the exam, I actually had this question, and that was on August 3rd, 2019. So the question is still available as of last year, so be aware in case you get it. Now that we know a bit more about the question, we can actually start getting into how to approach the question by understanding the common mistakes that most of you may be making when it comes to question number 2. So I'm going to provide you with a list of common mistakes that I often see in my students. One mistake that I see quite often is when students try to memorize information from the reading section in order to use it later as part of their answer. Trying to memorize anything often causes stress in students because if you don't remember exactly the information exactly as it appeared, it can be frustrating. It can, sort of shut you down when you're trying to speak, and that could be problematic. You don't have to memorize any sort of information from the reading section. You have to read the information, but it's not about memorization, it's about comprehension. It's important for you to understand what is mentioned there, but don't try to quote anything from the reading unless you are absolutely comfortable with it. Another mistake that I see quite often is the same situation, but regarding the listening section. Students often try really hard to just mention everything exactly the same, word for word, as it was given in the conversation, and we don't need this. The question is not telling you to quote the listening, so you can paraphrase any information regarding this question. Just make sure that your paraphrase is connected with the proper information that was given, whether in the reading section or the listening part of this question. A third mistake is not giving enough credit for the actual subject of the conversation. The conversation is always going to feature a man and a woman, and most of the time, the response revolves around only one of them. That's why the question may often say, according to the man or according to the woman. So our job is to always make sure that our answer is reflecting what they said. It is a very common mistake for students to confuse the pronouns and refer to a he as a she or a she as a he. This innocent mistake can actually affect your performance, because if the evaluators think that you're referring to the man instead of the woman, for example, and if the question is asking you about the woman, you're not going to get the points you need. So be very careful to make sure you are addressing the right character when giving the answer. The second to last mistake that I see quite often is when students try to add information that was not exactly mentioned neither by the reading section or the conversation. This activity is all about reporting what you read and what you heard, not about your opinion, not about your thoughts. Adding anything that was not directly mentioned in the reading or listening is actually an incorrect approach, and it will come back to hurt you if you try to do that. So make sure that the answer that you're delivering revolves around the reading and the listening section. And finally, the last mistake that I see a lot, in fact, many of my students, when they come to me, they have this mistake at the beginning, which is spending way too much time summarizing the reading at the beginning of the answer. The reading section is not the protagonist of this response. We actually have to focus a lot more on the conversation. So dedicating half of the time, 30 seconds, 25 seconds to the reading section can actually be very damaging for your answer. Many of you may relate to this. Many of you are not giving a proper response because you're running out of time in the information. If you simplify the reading section, you may have enough time. Now, with all this said and done, these are the common mistakes that students often make when doing this activity. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you an example of a real question. This question is coming from a TPO assignment, which many of you may know what a TPO is. It stands for Test Practice Online, and it's basically an online sample of the TOEFL test. I selected one activity at random, and I'm going to show you the example as to how I go through the reading, through the listening, and the actual response. Hopefully, after you hear the way that I put together this answer, you can imitate some of my approach, and hopefully this can help you get to a better grade in this question. Now, in case you want to follow along, the example that I'm going to be using is coming from TPO number 52. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question out loud so you guys can hear it, and then I'm going to give you some comments about what I got from the information and how I'm going to use this information to develop my answer. So let's start. I'm going to read the question right now. I'm going to read it out loud, so listen to it. Here we go. The title of the reading section says, Graduation Speakers Should Be a Business Leader. The actual reading says the following. It says, I think the university should invite a business leader to speak at this year's graduation ceremony. Perhaps an executive from one of the largest corporations in the area. For students, business leaders are excellent role models because they represent the meaning of professional success. They influence people every day, make important decisions, and have achieved impressive salaries. Furthermore, inviting a business executive would help reinforce the community that our business program is the biggest and best one in the state. Prospective students will read about the speech and will remember that our university has a strong and attractive business program. Sincerely, Ryan Brown. Now, that was the information from the reading section. There's a lot of information here, but in reality, and this is a little trick that I want you to remember, we don't need not even 90% of this information. When I approach my question in the real exam, and once again, I do this when I take the TOEFL exam. I never teach my students things that I'm not doing in my own test. I don't experiment with your performance. I experiment with my own test when I take the exam, and based on my results, I will continue to teach that way or change my approach if necessary. So what I'm teaching you has the results that you want. My students can vouch for that, and my performance can really show you why I want you to do this way. So the information here, it's telling me about an individual who wrote a letter highlighting or suggesting that it'll be best to have a business leader as the speaker for the graduation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, remember, the conversation is either going to be in favor of this, against this, or in between. Typically, you can expect some sort of a pushback. If I have to give you my own interpretation, I think that possibly in the exam you get like a 60% going against, 40% going in favor, and maybe like a 1%, if that makes any sense, where the information is in between. So I normally expect the conversation to be against the reading section. Sometimes I make a mistake. Sometimes the information is supporting each other, which really does not affect my response. I can just make a quick adjustment and that'll be okay. Now, from this reading information, the only thing that I want you to remember is actually the title of the reading. That's the only thing I want you to remember here. Remember the title, which in this case says, the graduation speaker should be a business leader. Everything else, honestly, is not that important. And I'm going to show you in my response why I don't pay attention to most of the reading. Now, I do read the information. It is important to understand what the reading is all about, but I choose not to use most of the information there because the question does not require that. Even when the question says briefly summarize the reading, I've approached that in the real exam by just providing the title of the reading section, and my speaking section still remains at 30 points. So they're not taking points away from me. I will assume they will not take points away from you either. Now, with the reading section out of the way, let's now listen to the conversation, pay attention to it, take notes, and then we'll discuss the information together.
Now listen to two students discuss the letter.
Hey, Carla, did you see Ryan's letter in the paper?
Yeah, but I have to say I disagree with his proposal.
Oh, yeah?
You know, it seems like it's always business people who speak at graduation. At least every year I've been here, it's always a business person speaking.
Think we could do with some variety?
I think other professions can be considered influential and successful, like, say, teachers.
Teachers are certainly influential and have an important role in the community.
Yeah, the school should consider having someone from another profession speak, since business leaders always do it.
Yeah, but what about his point about it being good for the business program?
Well, like Ryan said, that program is already quite big and well known. It doesn't really need the extra attention or free advertising that a graduation speaker would bring.
That's true.
I think our education program could really benefit from the free publicity. It's a great teacher training program, but it's not as well known. It'd be great if a local teacher could draw attention to it, which would definitely happen in a speech like that.
In the conversation, we had a man and a woman discuss their opinion about this article, and the lady clearly disagrees with it. The lady, according to her, she believes that it'll be better to have a teacher as a graduation speaker, and she gives the reasons behind her comments. So we know now that the information here is going against the reading. As I expected, that's what happened in this activity. After we've read the information and after we've listened to the information, we have enough content to actually create the answer. But before we start preparing, before we start using our preparation time in any way, we have to make sure we fully understand the question. Many of you jump to answer this question without actually properly reading the question. It is very common for students to deliver the answer without fully reading what the question wants. And this test is all about delivering what the TOEFL wants. You cannot fight the TOEFL test. If the test asks you for one particular answer, your job is to deliver that answer. If you follow the instructions, you're going to get the points. So one silly strategy, but it works really well, is give yourself the time to read the question. So let's take a look at it. The question says the following. The woman expresses her opinion of the idea expressed in the newspaper. State her opinion and explain the reason she gives for holding that opinion. That is the question. The question is actually telling me a lot. The question is reminding me that I'm dealing with an opinion from the newspaper. So an article, I could guess. And of course, the lady's opinion. I'm going to use that part of the question as part of my answer. So I already created a script for this answer. I'm going to read the information out loud to you guys and show you how we can actually deliver this response. So now I'm going to read the information that I put together for this answer. I'm going to actually read it from the script in order to save time, in order to have one take of this video. And I'm going to time myself to show you how long did I take to deliver this answer. Now, this is a typical response. This is an example of a typical response that I give in the real exam. So I prepare all my students to be able to deliver just this response, the way that I'm going to give it to you right now. So here we go. Once again, the question is asking me about the woman's opinion regarding the newspaper, and this is what I would say. I will start my approach in 3, 2, 1. Here I go. According to the newspaper article, it suggested that the graduation speaker should be a business leader. A couple of students have a conversation about this article, and the woman in the conversation disagrees with the newspaper article. The lady mentions that ever since she has been a student, the graduation speaker has always been a business person. She believes that another professional, such as a teacher, should be the speaker this time. The lady says that teachers are influential in the community and they could be great graduation speakers. In addition, the female student also said that having a teacher as the graduation speaker can actually boost the awareness of the education program in the university. The teacher training program is quite all right, but it's not well known. So according to the woman, having a teacher as a graduation speaker can bring some attention to the program. And these are the reasons why the lady disagrees with the ideas presented in the newspaper. Now that response, I was looking at the clock here, is actually 59 seconds and 44 tenths of a second. So it'll be just enough to comply with the information. Now it sounds like a lot, and you can see it right here. I'm putting the script right below so you can read it. However, this is actually the response that I expect students to deliver. This is how I train my students to get to this question, and most of them are able to deliver this question after just a few lessons. Breaking down this question this way, it's beneficial for many aspects. Now that you heard the response, let me break it down for you. So at the beginning, notice that I mentioned right there, according to the newspaper article, it suggested that the graduation speaker should be a business leader. Now this question is coming from, this information, is coming from the question. The question talks about a newspaper, I repeat the idea. And then I just read the title of the reading, which is, graduation speaker should be a business leader. Notice that is the only information that I mentioned according to the article. That's it. I don't mention anything else. And notice that my answer was exactly 59 seconds long. So if you allocate time to the actual conversation and not to the reading, you should be able to deliver a great response here. When it comes to question number 2, that is the biggest pro tip or the suggestion as a professional that I can give you, which is make sure to address the question, make sure not to waste time on the reading section. Just read the title of the reading section and then give me the opinion based on what the man or the woman said, depending on what the question wants. If you try it this way, I'll guarantee you that you're going to have enough time to actually deliver the answer. You're going to feel a bit more comfortable because you're not going to feel the pressure of the time. And as a result, you're going to deliver an answer that is filled with confidence, with the right information, and with the right approach. And there you have it. This was a very short lesson showing you how you can approach question number 2 for the speaking section. If you found this information useful, you can always reach me once again at the TOEFL IBT study group on Facebook. I am one of the administrators, so you should see my post right at the beginning. You can always message me and I will do my best to reply to you. In addition, if you wish to know more about my services, my lessons, and the way that I can help you prepare for the TOEFL exam, simply contact me once again on the TOEFL IBT study group. Once again, my name is Miguel Marcano. I hope this information was useful and hopefully you can integrate this approach into your responses, and I wish you the best when it comes to the TOEFL exam.